Hello everyone, welcome to my art channel where we do painting videos. Like always, I start by taping down my paper with masking tape just to make sure it stays flat as I paint. Then I start coloring the bottom of my page with some dark chrome yellow for about 2-3 centimeters, and notice I'm going slightly diagonal because I want my sun to be on the bottom right side, so it's going to get darker towards the top left, aka at an angle. I'm using less pressure as I move up so I can smoothly transition into my next color, which is cadmium yellow, which then I apply for about 1 to 2 centimeters on top of my previous one. I fill any gaps I've left over with my dark chrome yellow using my cadmium yellow, and as I move up again I use less and less pressure so it can smoothly transition into my next color, which is magenta. I'm going to use my magenta for the remaining of the page, using less pressure towards the yellow and more as I move up towards the top of the page because I want that to be my darkest area. So I apply it very lightly around the yellows and use more pressure towards the top. Then I take my ultramarine blue and I apply it on top of the magenta because blue and magenta make a very nice purple/violet, which is ideal for on this sky for the sunrise I'm going for. I mostly apply it where I used more pressure with the magenta, and I just overall skip the area where the magenta meets the yellow because then the blue would mix with the yellow and would make green, which we do not want for this. I apply more and more pressure towards the top left corner and I add a bit more magenta over there. Then I take my watercolor brush and I start blending from light to dark, so I go from my cadmium yellow, which is the brightest color I used for this. I blend downwards towards the dark chrome yellow and I crumple up my tissue and pick up a little bit of the wet paint right there to create my sun. Then I keep on blending upwards towards the magenta very lightly in that area where I apply it with little pressure. Make sure they transition sort of smoothly to each other. We don't want like a straight block of yellow, then a block of magenta, then a block of blue. We want this to be sort of smooth because it's a sky, but if there is some streakiness, it's perfectly fine. Maybe it's gonna look like clouds, but it's perfectly fine. You don't need this to be 100% perfect. Also because we will have trees in the background and then more trees in the foreground, so if you make any mistakes they will get covered up. I just keep on blending my magenta and ultramarine, which made this nice prune/purple color. And once dry, I take a scrap piece of watercolor paper on which I will mix my three base colors, my ultramarine, the magenta, and the dark chrome yellow. I'm going to mix these three to a warm brown color and use it to paint my trees in the background. The reason I'm mixing my colors rather than just using one of the browns from the set is if you respect the same color scheme throughout your painting, it will end up looking much more neutral, natural, and balanced overall, rather than just keep adding on new colors with each layer as you go. So I take a good amount of water actually, because watercolor pencils dry very fast, so don't be scared to add a lot of water to this. And I mix the three until I get this very nice reddish brown. Then I start painting my trees with it. I just do a sort of straight line, and then I do the branches and tap on top of them randomly to add the foliage. If I mess up part of the tree trunk or something else, I just tap on top of it and cover it up with more foliage. That's why painting nature sceneries is overall very forgiving and you can always fix it up. I add more water and I make a bigger mix because I realized that the initial puddle was not going to be enough to paint all of the trees. And I just keep repeating the same process with making straight lines and then tapping over them. Some are gonna be vertical, some are gonna be tilted. The key to painting nature sceneries is to make all of your trees look sort of different, make them different heights, give them different foliage in different places, put the branches in different places than your previous trees. Basically just make it random, that's the key. And if drawing is not your thing, there is a traceable to this and all of my other tutorials over at my Patreon page, Sunshine Arts. And by doing so, you also help support me and the channel. And like always, all of the supplies used and the reference picture you saw me viewing on my smartphone will be linked down in the description box below the video. Back to the painting, I finished my last tiny tree right there in the center. My paint had dried on that scrap piece of paper, so I take a new one, and again I lay down my magenta, ultramarine, and dark chrome yellow, but this time I add a block of black, because I will be using this mix to paint my trees that are in the foreground and are going to be a slightly darker tone. So I get my watercolor brush with a good amount of water on it and I mix all 4 of these colors. Feel free to add extra water and make sure it stays wet as you paint and it doesn't dry up on you. Then I just paint a big tree right across the painting, right in the center. It's perfectly fine if it overlaps some of your previous tree. Just try to keep it smooth, then add the branches and the foliage on top of them like we did with the previous ones. And if it ends up looking lighter than what you intended, it's fine. You can just do another layer, 2 layers, 3 layers on top of it until you're happy. The reason I choose to mix my black gradually with the other 3 colors is you can always go darker and build your color up, but once you go very saturated, very dark, you cannot take much of that color off. So it's just a general helpful tip whenever you're using watercolor media. You can always build it up, you can always make it darker, but if you make it pitch black straight from the beginning, you can't really fix that. Then I do another tiny tree on the far right side of my painting, just a straight line again, some branches popping out of it, and then tap on top to add the foliage. Lastly, I add a bush on the bottom left side of my painting. I use whatever I have left over from that mix and randomly tap to create my shrub. Then I do some random twigs and dots on top of it to make it a bit more naturey, a bit more like in the photo reference. But it still ended up too light and that's perfectly fine. To darken it up, I just take my black pencil, I rub my brush against it and I add more black to darken it up as I go. I also add some twigs, some grass blades around my big tree there in the front. And I darken up the tree trunk on my forest tree on the right side because it was looking a bit too pale. You could see all of the colors of the sky peeking through it, so I just quickly go over that. Lastly, I slowly peel off my tape in the opposite direction to avoid ripping the paper. I'd like to give a very special thank you to my Patreons for the month of February and thank you all for watching. We'll see each other in the next video. Bye bye!